London, February 2026. The fog doesn't just roll in, it colonizes the streets. Elena sat in the back of a vintage charcoal sedan, her eyes fixed on the digital display of her tablet. 3 years of planning, every stitch of the lace, every vintage crystal chandelier, every bottle of 1996 vintage Krug, all gone. Her cousin Clara didn't just steal a mood board, she executed a hostile takeover of Elena's identity. The venue was a deconsecrated cathedral, draped in heavy velvet the color of dried blood. Clara stood at the altar, wearing a custom gown that Elena had spent 18 months designing with a blind tailor in Paris. It was the ultimate betrayal, a legacy sabotage executed with surgical precision. Clara smiled, thinking she had won because she had the ring and the applause. The law is a cold instrument, much like a scalpel. Elena's legal team had spent the last 48 hours weaponizing the contracts Clara had so carelessly signed. Because Clara had used the legacy fund as a personal piggy bank, she had triggered a malicious conversion clause Elena had buried in the family trust decades ago. As the priest reached the climax of the vows, Elena's lead counsel stepped out of the shadows. The music stopped, not with a fade, but with a screech of feedback. The lights shifted to a harsh, unforgiving teal. This was the payoff. The bailiffs entered, their movements synchronized and robotic. They didn't care about the guests' gasps or Clara's mounting hysteria. They began to dismantle the dream. The head bailiff approached Clara and simply pointed to the dress. Elena finally stepped into the light as Clara stood in the center of the room, her empire of lies crumbling into piles of confiscated lace. Elena didn't look angry. She looked bored. She leaned in and whispered, "You wanted my life, Clara. Now you have my debts." Elena turned and walked toward the exit, the click of her heels echoing like a countdown. Perfectly neutral, perfectly cold. The silence in the cathedral wasn't holy. It was expensive. As the bailiffs tagged the crystal centerpieces with neon orange seizure stickers, the true scope of the betrayal came into focus. Clara hadn't just used the family fund. She had forged Elena's biometric signature to secure high-risk mezzanine debt, collateralized against Elena's private art collection. This wasn't a wedding. It was a liquidation event, disguised as a celebration. Elena's father, the family patriarch, stepped forward, his face a mask of universal khaki neutrality. He expected Elena to fold for the sake of the legacy. But Elena had already dismantled that legacy, brick by brick. She showed him the tablet. Clara had been funneling assets to an offshore account in the Caymans for months. Clara wasn't the victim. She was the architect of the family's ruin. The micro-outrage was the realization that the perfect daughter was a digital thief. In 2026, the greatest betrayal is digital. Clara had blocked Elena from the family's smart home servers, effectively deleting Elena from her own childhood home, while the wedding was being planned. Psychological murder through status updates. But Elena had used that time to audit every single digital footprint Clara left. Every AirTag Clara planted on Elena's car to track her movements was now evidence in a stalking and fraud indictment. The wedding thief wasn't just after the money. She wanted to erase Elena's existence. As the guests began to flee the scene to avoid being named in the seizure affidavits, the harsh teal emergency lights flickered on. The atmosphere shifted from noir to nightmare. Elena stood by the baptismal font, watching as the bailiffs began to strip the silk linings from the walls. Everything was evidence now. Clara collapsed on the steps of the altar. Her designer dress, a stolen prototype, now nothing more than an exhibit in a criminal case. She looked at Elena, pleading for a sisterhood that she had sold for a high CPM lifestyle. Elena didn't flinch. She simply checked her watch. The interest on the seizure loan had just compounded. "The debt doesn't sleep, Clara," Elena whispered. "And neither do I." The cathedral's Wi-Fi was the first thing to turn against them. As Claire tried to call her lawyers, she realized her biometric ID had been revoked across all platforms. In 2026, being locked out of your cloud is the equivalent of a social death sentence. Elena didn't just take the money. She initiated a digital ultimatum. Every private message, every forged document Clara had ever sent was now queued for a public leak on her own high-follower social accounts. "You thought blocking me from the family server was a win," Elena said, her voice cutting through the sound of bailiffs moving crates. "But you left the AirTags active. I didn't just track your location, Clara. I tracked your transactions." Elena held up a device showing the real-time drainage of Clara's offshore accounts. The hunter had become the prey through simple technical negligence. This was the spaghetti code of Clara's life unraveling. The enablers, the bridesmaids, the fake friends, the business partners watched their own phones begin to buzz with notifications. Elena had weaponized the contracts they all signed for the exclusive wedding coverage. By participating in a celebration funded by stolen assets, they were now legally accomplices after the fact. The room turned cold as they realized their own reputations were the next collateral in Elena's audit. Economic gaslighting worked both ways. Clara had convinced the family Elena was unstable to secure the trust funds. Now, Elena presented the metadata, the proof of Clara's digital stalking and impersonation. In the cold light of the cathedral's emergency beams, the patriarch's neutrality finally broke. He didn't see a daughter or a niece anymore. He saw a liability that needed to be liquidated. Clara reached for the vintage Krug bottle, the last thing not yet tagged by the bailiffs. It was empty, just like the legacy she tried to build on Elena's grave. Elena stepped closer, the teal light making her look like a vengeful spirit. "The wedding is over, Clara, but the debt has just reached its first maturity date." Elena's shadow stretched across the altar, long and sharp as a blade. The cathedral doors didn't just close, they were locked from the outside by private security. In the world of high-stakes Noir, exit is a privilege, not a right. Elena's legal team began the asset inventory in real time. Every piece of jewelry Clara wore, every gift she had received from the family fund, was legally classified as proceeds of a crime. The micro-outrage peaked when the lead bailiff requested Clara to hand over her engagement ring. It wasn't just a diamond. It was a 4.2-carat piece of evidence. Clara's groom, a man whose net worth was as fragile as his loyalty, stepped back. He didn't defend her. He checked his prenuptial agreement on his cloud. Elena watched him realize that by marrying Clara tonight, he was inheriting her liabilities, nearly $8 million in liquidated damages and interest. The betrayal was no longer just between cousins. It was a systemic collapse of Clara's entire social ecosystem. Digital betrayal is permanent. Elena played the final recording. Clara laughing about how she had erased Elena from the family's digital legacy. The audio echoed through the cathedral's high-end sound system, the same system Clara had stolen money to install. The guests, once enablers, now recorded the scene on their phones, not as friends, but as vultures, documenting a fall from grace for their own high CPM feeds. The patriarch finally spoke. He didn't call for mercy. He called for his private banker. "Liquidate the wedding trust," he said, his voice as neutral as universal khaki. "Every cent goes to Elena's restitution. Clara is no longer a beneficiary. In 2026, family isn't about blood. It's about the security of the asset pool. Clara was now a zero on the balance sheet." The bailiffs moved to the final asset, the wedding thief herself. They didn't arrest her. They escorting her to the edge of the property, her stolen gown trailing in the dirt. Elena watched from the choir loft, her silhouette a dark monument of calculated revenge. She didn't feel joy. She felt the satisfaction of a perfectly closed audit. The debt was being collected. The cathedral was empty now, save for the debris of a stolen dream, shredded lace, broken glass, and the smell of ozone from the teal floodlights. Elena walked slowly toward the altar, her heels clicking against the cold marble, like a clock ticking down to zero. She wasn't looking for God. She was looking for the final signature on the seizure warrant. In 2026, the only true confession is a signed admission of liability. Elena reached the steps where Clara had collapsed. She picked up a single invitation, the one Clara had sent to her as a final insult. Elena didn't burn it. She simply updated the digital QR code on it. Now, anyone who scanned it wouldn't see a wedding menu. They would see the full forensic audit of Clara's fraud, a digital legacy sabotage that would follow Clara for the rest of her life. Outside, the snow had turned the London streets into a monochrome desert. Elena's car was waiting. As she stepped into the night, she saw Clara standing under a flickering street lamp, her stolen dress ruined, her perfect life liquidated. Elena didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The automated system had already sent the daily interest notification to Clara's phone. The audit never truly ends.
Revenge is a dish best served with a clear audit trail. Elena leaned back in the leather seat, the charcoal shadows of the car swallowing her silhouette. She had lost a family, but she had reclaimed her identity. In the world of Noir 2026, that was a fair trade. Transaction complete, the car's AI whispered in a cold, neutral voice.
As the car pulled away, the loop closed. The final notification on Elena's screen showed the first payment being deducted from Clara's future earnings. The cycle of debt and betrayal was the only thing left of their bond. Elena closed her eyes, the fog of London consuming the last of the cathedral's teal glow. London, February 2026. The fog doesn't just roll in, it colonizes the streets.